Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's webinar partnered with Gordian, entitled A Look Behind the Curtain, How RSMeans Data is Sourced and Engineered. I am Tamel Harbison with the SAME National Team, and I will be in the background to help with any technical issues you might experience throughout this presentation. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. You are all in a listen-only mode, but we ask to double-check your phones and devices to make sure that it is muted. We also ask that you submit any written questions at any time during the event via the Questions tab in your control panel. You may download the PDA certificate and the presentation in the handout section in the control panel as well, and today's webinar will be recorded. I would now like to turn it over to our moderator for today, Lisa Cooley. You now have the digital floor.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am absolutely delighted to be moderating this webinar today with three of my esteemed colleagues who will share a little bit about RSMeans data. We know that those in DoD and the federal space are very reliant on RSMeans data as the most trusted industry standard, but we also know that you have to defend your budgets, and that many times you are called on to explain how you arrived at budgets or independent government estimates. And so we formulated this webinar to really share with you how the data is put together. There's a lot of complexity in how the data is developed and how it is applied. And we want you to have a little bit of a glimpse of the work that goes on behind the scenes, the people, the process, and the data that results in your RSMeans title. And hope that will support you in defending your budgets and your IGEs. So let's start with the poll. Let's see who is on the call. Do you represent active military or civilian at a government agency, or small or large businesses or academic institutions? And it looks like we have a mix. We actually have as many business people as government folks here, and obviously businesses also need to be able to defend their estimates in conjunction with government contracts and projects. So delighted to have everyone here. So it is my great pleasure to introduce three of my colleagues. So we have Noam Reininger, who is our Chief Data and Product Officer at Gordian. Gordian, I think most of you know, acquired RSMeans in 2014. And Tamel, I'm having a little trouble. There we go. Yes, you could intervene and advance the slides for me. I'm having a little trouble there. So Noam is our Chief Product and Data Officer, and also General Manager of Federal Solutions. Noam and I work very closely in supporting our federal customers. Noam has a long history in IT and data. Began his career at Dell, and then also worked. Created a technology-focused startup, but most recently came to us from Dun & Bradstreet, where he oversaw a portfolio of data solutions focused on Fortune 500 companies. He was Vice President of Product at Dun & Bradstreet. Next up, we will have Tim Duggan. Tim Duggan has been with RSMeans and then Gordian for 15 years. Oh, it looks like I got them mixed up. So Bob Mewis has been with Gordian for RSMeans and then Gordian for 25 years. Nobody knows the RSMeans database better than Bob. Any of our enterprise federal customers, if they have deep questions on the RSMeans database, chances are they will end up on a call with Bob Mewis. And then finally we have Tim Duggan. who has been with associated with the RSMeans brand for 15 years, and now Gordian, and really since the get-go has been known for innovating around the RSMeans database with a series of new product releases, most recently predictive data. So with that, I will hand it off to Noam and let you hear from our experts.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. First of all, I wanted to start out with a thank you for all of your support. I know a lot of you have been working with RSMeans and Gordian for many, many, many years. And I wanted to start out with an appreciation. We do this really for what Lisa talked about, and I'll explain is I call that the moment of truth. And one of my favorite things to do is to speak with clients. I spend as much time as I can doing that. And there's a reoccurring theme that comes up with, a lot of estimators that I talk to, project managers that are working potentially in IDIQ programs. And it's that moment of truth when you have to defend an estimate or proposal, either to leadership, to some type of committee, to a contractor that you're working with, or if you're a contractor, you're working with an owner, and you have to defend it. And it's all about trust, right? Does the room trust you in how you came up with the estimate? Can you defend it? And in turn, if you're using RSMeans data, can you trust us in our methodology? And what we're going to talk about today is the process, the technology, and the methodology to ensure that we have the most accurate, defendable, and trustworthy construction cost data set in North America. We're really going to take you behind the curtain. As Lisa mentioned, I did not come to Gordian RSMeans from the construction industry. I came from a data company, Dun & Bradstreet. One of the oldest U.S. companies, 185 years old, where Abraham Lincoln worked and 3 other presidents. But what we did day in, day out is ensure that the data that we produced at Dun & Bradstreet was of the highest quality and integrity and trust, so that very big decisions could be made with it. And so that's really the focus that I'm bringing to Gordian and RSMeans. So I want to start out with the history of our data, because I think it's important to understand where we've come from and where we're going and how that relates to what we do. RSMeans has been a trusted, very high quality data set for a long time. And we published the first book in 1942. It took us 50 years to introduce our first CD software. And then 10 years after that, we launched RSMeans Online. Gordian, came in 2014. And the focus, and you see things accelerating, the focus of Gordian and what we try to do every day, we already have an amazing, trusted, high quality data source. And it's really moving forward and addressing the needs of the world around us. And I wanted to talk to some of these trends, and you're seeing we have an API and predictive analytics. The world around us, as we see every day, is getting faster, it's getting more volatile, it's getting less predictive. And when I talk to clients, there's more and more people asking for estimators and project managers to do more with less. And so the questions we're trying to answer is, how do we integrate our data so that it's available in whatever the software that you need to get your job done? How do we make that easy? How do we handle questions like, what will this cost me 3 years into the future? How do I need to think about this estimate if it's in a volatile market? What happens after a hurricane? And what does that mean to construction costs? And what happens if there's less people and I need to create conceptual estimates faster? And I just realized that in the excitement of getting going here, I did not turn my camera on. So apologies for that. Here I am. So now you can see me in person. So that's a little bit about the history. And I want to talk to you about the foundation of how we think about that trust. What are we doing to ultimately create the most accurate data set and the most trustworthy data set? And I think of it as a house with a foundation, first story, and then a roof. And the foundation is all about data quality. The first story is about how we use statistics and data science, to ensure we get that quality done right. And then technology, how do we get that into your hands, and how do we become more efficient and more accurate? So I'll start out with data quality, the foundation of our house that everything is built off of. And we have two core approaches within our organization. One is very, very, very deep expertise. We're building all the tasks and assemblies and square foot models. What's critical for us is that we have a staff of construction professionals that have spent decades in the field that really understand what it takes to install something. What are the materials, how much equipment, what kind of crew does it need? And we have folks from all the different trades, and Bob and Tim will walk you through that. And that's a critical component. It's that human component, that expertise component of folks that really know and understand each specific trade. The second part of our quality algorithm is around very rigorous process controls and statistical controls. And I'll talk about statistics in a little bit, but we employ what we call standard work. Every process of how we collect, refine, and validate, data within RSMeans and Gordian follows an extremely rigorous process that we audit and review on a monthly basis to ensure that the output, that what you're getting and what was built by a set of very, very deep construction professionals, has the highest level of quality. And what we add to that is data science, statistics, and AI. And so in addition to having rigorous process controls, a very, very deep bench, we're using best-in-class and world-class analytics, data science, statistics, first to validate everything that we're doing, and then to look at new and interesting use cases of what would this cost to build 3 years from now, and how can we make that at a high certainty? What would happen to the cost of this unit cost line or assembly or square foot model? What would happen in a volatile market, after an earthquake? And how do we apply statistics and data science to that? And our next foray, and we've made a lot of investments, and we have a beta program right now really focused on artificial intelligence, is how do we help our customers speed up the process of creating a conceptual estimate? How do we make conceptual estimates more accurate? And lastly, the roof of the house is technology. So a tremendous amount of investment in technology, really on two fronts. First front is the automation of our process and quality control checks. And so we have a custom-built software system that ensures that when we're building cost data, as we're collecting cost data information, that's following a very rigorous process that's automated with software, so that the humans that are entering the data and making those decisions don't have to work with spreadsheets. That's number one. And the second investment in technology is really around ensuring that you, our customers, have best-in-class tools to leverage our data, whether that's using our APIs and integrating directly into environments like Builder, or whether that's investments into RSMeans Online or our API and other environments. It's really, how do we get the data in your hands in the most easy way? I'll finish with this, which is a slide with a lot of numbers in it. And, we talk about, our 22,000 hours of research. I'm not going to read all of the numbers here. What I want to emphasize is the amount of rigor and volume and veracity, of how we collect and how much we collect to ensure that you have the most trustworthy data set at your fingertips. I'm looking forward to answering any questions later on when we get to the questions. This was just the intro to really talk about the foundation of our house, quality, the statistics and the AI and technology on top. And I'm going to hand it off to Bob Mewis, our principal engineer, to take you a little bit deeper into how we make the data.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Noam. I really appreciate that. And looking forward to talking about how RSMeans data is put together for you for the next few minutes. And then after we introduce some of our teammates, I'll also talk a little bit about how RSMeans data is used. So let's begin with how your cost data is created. If you think of a pyramid, the largest part of the pyramid, the base of the pyramid, is where we begin. We think of that base of the pyramid as the foundation, and that's our information sources. The sources of information, materials, equipment, and wage rates for the labor are all part of that base. If we begin to move up a level, we can start to talk about what we refer to as unit prices. So in this graphical example, a unit price here would be a window. Every bit of information on that unit price is based upon a specific unit of measure. So the material, the labor, and the equipment is all calculated based upon what the unit of measure is for that particular window. Moving up another level are assemblies. Assemblies are groups of unit prices. In this graphical example, the assembly is the exterior wall. The entire exterior wall may be built with a convenient unit of measure. And then the reason that we use assemblies is it certainly speeds up the estimating process. Speeding up that process allows people to do more with less time involved, obviously. Now, one of the great advantages of assemblies is it provides a lot of detail behind the scenes for the person that's building the estimate. In our electronic products, RSMeans Online and CostWorks CD, you can actually view the unit costs that are used to build those assemblies. Moving up another level now is our square foot models. In this example, it's the entire building. Let's say that this is an office building. This is multiple assemblies put together to build the price for that entire building. We use mathematical algorithms and some database tables to calculate the quantities for each component, and thus the prices from the assemblies are what put together the cost per square foot for the entire building. Now, this enables somebody to build the estimate for an entire building in just a few moments. It really only takes a minute or two to put together an entire estimate. And you have to remember that the square foot model is built from assemblies, which in turn is built from unit prices. So there's a tremendous amount of detail that goes into this. It's also important to understand that we build our data with the thinking of both new and renovation construction. We have different data sets, and each one of those different areas, new and renovation, contains all of this type of information: unit prices, assemblies, and square foot models. One of the data sets that we do have available is our facilities maintenance and repair. And I want to talk a little bit about the structure of that data set while I have the chance here with you. So the facilities maintenance and repair is primarily assemblies based, and that's important to remember. It's organized in 3 sections. The first section is the preventative maintenance. And this is where we have assemblies that describe the tasks required to maintain components of your structure. Those tasks contain both material and labor information, but also, and most importantly, they also contain some kind of frequency. how often that preventative maintenance task should be performed. Because we have all that information, the material, the labor, and the frequency, we're able to calculate a cost for an extended period of time for what it takes to maintain that particular component of your building. Additionally, in the facilities maintenance and repair data set, we have groups of assemblies in regards to repairing, making a major repair. So let's use a boiler as an example. If we suddenly had to replace the pump on a boiler, we have an assembly that describes for us what the cost is to remove the existing pump and replace it with a new one. And part of that information is also the frequency of how often somebody should expect that to occur. This enables facilities managers to predict out into the future so that they can understand how much they have to plan for in regards to maintaining their facilities. And then finally, assemblies on complete component replacement, the entire boiler this time. What the cost is to remove and replace that entire boiler. And again, we also have the frequency of how often that should be done. Now, frequency can also be termed as service life or even expected useful life. So you can see this is very important information for people to have. Let me talk a little bit, and I'll go over this a little bit deeper as we move through the presentation here, but I'll talk really quickly about each of the categories we use for development of our research. First off, material prices. We're going to obtain our material prices from the same places that contractors do. We're going to go to those building material suppliers. But we are also using the data analytics and statistical information we gather during that process to help us with certain aspects of material price collection. We're looking for trends and patterns in price changes and to see if there's any prices that correlate with each other. This enables the use of certain price indicators to let us know when we should focus on certain materials that are out there. For labor, I'll refer first to what I call our base data. The base data is the information that you see printed in our cost data books or the national average component of our electronic products. The base data labor is based upon union scale wages from 30 cities across the United States. So we will call the union halls for the carpenters in 30 major cities across the United States and get their wages. We put those all together and average them. The base data is the average wage for those union scale tradespeople. Now, for our city cost index, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on, we also have to use other sources of cost information for labor. Davis-Bacon wages that are set by the federal government for federally funded projects, and prevailing wages, which is really what Davis-Bacon wages end up being, are collected. And we also have contacts with contract labor agreements for tradespeople's wages in different parts of the country. Finally, equipment costs. We're going to the rental places, the rental houses that have the construction equipment for rent, and they're giving us the cost daily, weekly, monthly, along with any operating costs and fuel costs that we need. Finally, we'll be doing research on both crews and productivity. Productivity being how much work can be done in a given time period. We gather all that, put it together in order to build a unit price or a task, and that provides a cost for everything on that item. Here's the formula that we use. We take the material per unit of measure and then add to that the labor and equipment influenced by the productivity, and add those together to get the cost per unit of measure. So that will calculate for us what we refer to as the bare cost. The bare cost is unburdened. It's just the base cost for it, and we do present our information in that manner. But we also present our information that includes overhead and profit. And in all of our products, we describe what markups we use for overhead and profit, workers' compensation insurance, federal and state unemployment taxes, and so on. And we describe that for any of our users in all of our products. So let's dive a little bit deeper now into some of the things or the components of cost that we're just talking about. First off, materials. We're going to go as our primary source for material prices to those building material suppliers, the same places that contractors are going for those building materials. We also use vendors, people that are selling the building materials to the contractors. We will use manufacturers' list prices, but we do have to make the phone call to find out what the current discount rate is for contractors who are buying at purchase or buying at quantity. We do have some online sources, and we do like to use those. And we also study some of the analytics from the information that we've gathered to assist with trends or patterns in material prices. In the real world, we have found over the years that our research indicates certain things. There's prices for materials depending upon, how do I put this? It's depending upon not where you are, but where the product is manufactured and distributed. In many cases, for larger pieces, larger material items, it's manufactured and priced at a national level. Something like an air handler or an elevator. Prices don't change much for that particular material throughout the country. They're pretty much the same. But then we have materials that are manufactured on a regional basis. They're manufactured in facilities regionally, and the price is adjusted due to those market conditions in that particular area. I know that a lot of materials like asphalt roofing shingles or clay tile roofing, those are manufactured and priced regionally. You don't find many clay tile roof products here in New England. Then there's regional material prices, where raw materials from defined regions are cheaper in that region, but more expensive as they move further and further away. Western red cedar. It's relatively inexpensive in the Pacific Northwest, but here in New England, it's a lot different to get Western red cedar. And then finally, there's local prices, those heavy materials that need to be transported. Some of the ones that are sourced directly from the earth, gravel, stone, items like that. They have some local specificity to them, and there's certain prices that we need to get in multiple locations so that we can come up with a good cost or a good average for that. Here's a graphical example of what we mean by national, regional, and local. National obviously being the entire country, regional being by those regions that you see in the boxes, and then local in the specific areas mentioned, New England, Middle Atlantic, South Atlantic, and so on. Our pricing process reflects what is appropriate for commercial construction projects. We're not going to call and ask for the price of one 2x4. We're going to call and ask for the price of a quantity of materials that's based upon commercial construction needs. So a typical model that we use is that of a 3-story, 30,000 square foot office building, and what the quantities of the materials would be for a building of that size and nature. We will capture the prices for our materials from multiple sources to determine what the average cost is per the unit of measure, not just one source, multiple sources. One of the things we do ask for is having that material delivered to the job site. We generally draw a circle around the location about 20 miles away so that we can define for the supplier how far delivery is. We do not include any kind of sales tax. Those are so different in so many different parts of the country that it's best for the local people who are building the estimates to add the sales tax themselves when necessary. We also include in our data special line items called modifiers. Those modifiers allow our customers to adjust prices for smaller or larger quantities. And they are based upon research that we've done and in historically defined ratios that we keep track of. We also have other line items that we can use to define for the cost for further distances for delivery as well for materials. We do use some statistical analysis as part of our material intelligence, if you will. We'll take some statistical analysis to build material groups, and material groups are the ones that show us that these materials, regardless of what they are, seem to change at the same pace, at the same rate. That allows us to create dependencies, if you will. There's a possibility that they share some basic raw material, and the price goes up and down the same way for those materials. So if we see one of these materials start to change, it alerts us to begin to look for the other materials that relate to it. We also look for the highest or the most used material in groups. We call that a driver, a material price driver or a material price indicator. When we see the price change on that particular material, it also alerts us to the possibility that the other materials that are influenced by that one will change as well. And again, that gives us the intelligence to go out and do some additional cost research. We do look these correlations and relationships over annually, and we will update them to make sure that they stay precise and apparently are working well for us. Now, obviously, there are materials that are used more often. Therefore, we find it is better for us to research those materials because they're used a lot more frequently on construction projects and their prices are more volatile. So it demonstrated on this graphic in the upper right-hand corner, these are the materials that we will research most often, sometimes even more frequently than quarterly. So for example, if we suddenly had a disaster, a natural disaster that occurred, we may have to go in and research these materials in particular locations as frequently as monthly, and we will do that. And it might not be something like a natural disaster, it could be a tariff that's been imposed. If we have to extend the amount of research, we will do that for those highly volatile, highly used materials. It works its way through, and every material in our database is assigned kind of a rating, and it fits into one of these categories. So you can see that for the low volatility and low usage materials, we will not be researching those as often as the ones that are most important to the industry. For labor, again, for our base data, we're getting union scale wages in those 30 major cities, taking an average and using that as part of the base data. For the city cost index, again, which I'll talk about a little bit further, we're finding Davis-Bacon wages, those set by the federal government, and prevailing wages for different parts of the country. We also do quite a bit of research to see where the differences are between union scale and open shop, because we also are able to produce our data with open shop wages. And in some places, it can be a significant difference. And also, we have some products for the residential market, and we are producing data using residential wage rates, again, with benefits that would be for large-scale residential construction, not necessarily the one single-family home builder, but for somebody that's building 30 or 40 homes a year. That's the kind of wage rates that we're looking for in the residential market. Once we know what the wages are for the trades, we are able to build the crews. Now, the RSMeans data has over 800 crews that we've put together. Our engineering team has years of experience in studying and understanding the crews that it takes to do that particular construction task. Many of our people have been in the field and understand or know what crew is needed and what type of equipment is necessary for the task. But we also bring together a committee of people whenever a crew or productivity question comes up. That committee is assigned to discuss and come to consensus as to what people, what equipment, and what productivity is required for that particular task that we're looking at. That field experience and engineering experience that we have is unique to RSMeans, and we really believe that the varied experience that we do have enables us to discuss and come up with the right crews and the right productivity for every task. The way we do it is we take actual field measurements, actually going out to job sites and measuring how much work has been done. We'll look at contractor input and feedback. You know, if contractors call us and say you just can't work that fast, we'll take that into account as part of what our productivity committee team looks for. We'll look for guidance from vendors, material suppliers. We'll use our own experience. We've associated ourselves with a group of the certified professional estimators, and we'll ask for their input. And we also have time and motion studies, engagements that we've been brought in for people that are introducing new products or new processes, where we'll actually go and measure how much material can be installed by a certain crew in a given time period. We use those engagements to inform the productivity information for our data. And remember that that committee is no less than 3 of our senior staff members discussing and gaining consensus on what proper productivity is for construction tasks. And finally, equipment, where we're putting together the price for a task. We're using rented equipment prices with the costs for operation of that equipment, fuel, lubrication, maintenance, and so on. It's important for everybody to remember that mobilization and demobilization is extra. That's something that needs to be added in that often people forget. Moving that piece of equipment, for example, in the photo, that crane there is a significant cost in a construction project. Not only bringing it to the job site, but once it's at the job site, moving it around can have an impact on your final cost. I've been talking about the engineering staff and our data analytics team. It's important for me to let Tim Duggan talk to you a little bit more about those people themselves. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Tim Duggan, who's going to talk a little about who creates your cost data. Tim?
Okay, thanks, Bob. I really appreciate that. And really it's to give you a break because you get into so much detail that we need to give you a little space before we get into some more detail about the data. Number one, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The first thing I'd like to do is ask you if you have any questions. We have a chat box. Please submit those questions so that we can queue them up for the end of the session so that we can do the Q&A. But in the break for Bob, I'm going to talk to you about who creates our data and the team that works behind the scenes to do all the things that Bob has already gone through, and give you an understanding of that so that you can see where the value comes from that RSMeans brings to the data, to the data. Okay. The way we're organized is into these four basic groups. We have researchers that do the price research that Bob was talking about, calling those suppliers, getting the local price, getting the price for a quantity of material, determining the discounts for all the material, labor, and equipment data that gets collected, and use that and put that into our database. Then there's the engineering team that takes that pricing data and builds the unit cost lines that Bob talked about, creates those formulas, determines the productivity, and we have the people doing it that are in specializations that I'm going to mention to you in a minute. The analytics group that both Noam and Bob mentioned a number of times are the people that analyze our data to see what kind of patterns and trends exist, what those relationships are, and also analyzing the usage data. What kind of items are being used in the field to do building so that we can do that high volatility variance of costs and also what kind of material is being used the most. And then finally is that quality assurance team. And it's a group of people that review the data, review our standard work that was mentioned, to make sure that our people do what we've said is our standard process, to the extent that when they collect a price, we need to know who you talk to, when you talk to them, and a document of some sort that backs up the price that you collected. Because that is one of the ways we come out and we can defend the data for you so that you know exactly where it came from and where we resourced that information for the prices. So that's what our quality assurance team does, and then make sure that the quality of the data transforms into when it goes into our products. So it's across the board, and making sure that when you get the data in front of you to use it in the field, that you can be confident that it is the right data that we wanted, that should be sent to you for your region or for whatever that material is. Sometimes I do this picture, this is a picture, and I actually show you the 50 or so people that are part of our organization. But in this case, we're talking about 50 full-time employees with over 500 years of construction experience in one form or another. Research people have either a lot of experience in doing research, because as you might guess, it's very difficult to make calls to people and ask them for prices day in and day out everywhere in the country. It takes a skill to be able to use in order to collect prices on an annual and quarterly basis. The engineering team, obviously with the experience that they have in engineering as well as construction experience that we talked about. The data quality team, the data science team actually work very much hand in hand together and do a lot of analytics to go along with that quality check. and then our production team to make sure that our books and our electronic products are produced and are able to be set up so that you can use them effectively and efficiently to find what you need and to create the estimates that you need. And then Noam also made a mention to the data tools team. We are constantly upgrading our tools to make it quicker and easier and more accurately controlled data collection, because that's what it's all about. It's making sure that every material gets the right prices put into it so that it can be rolled up and or labor wage collected and evaluated at the time of collection, and then rolled up together. What we call a roll up is how we roll the data from those material, labor, and equipment up to a unit cost line, up to an assembly, and up to that model that Bob talked about earlier in the presentation. So that's kind of the core data organization. But we then break down that organization into specialties, like you're familiar with master format, which is the numbers on the bottom of this chart, and literally have our group broken up based on the number of lines, unit cost lines that exist in our data. And there is 54% of our lines, the number of lines that we have to create, are in our MEP section, which makes sense with the number of different pipes and electrical conduit and all different sizes and combinations, that they have the most amount of lines that need to be monitored. So they have the biggest group of our people that are associated to them, as well as our architectural, structural, and civil teams. And you can see, as I list here on the top, is in each group has a dedicated engineers that have experience in that particular discipline. So this is how we break up our team to make sure that we define the specialties, and that you build up a skill in that particular market, whether you're a researcher, engineer, and also the production people or the analytic people. When they look at it, they learn a specialty that goes along with that kind of data in that particular segment of the data. We'd like to let you know about our qualifications. The team is, as we said, made up of construction professionals, and you can see the number of certifications that we do have with our staff that we utilize to oversee and also to work with construction professionals and our researchers to make sure that we're doing and make sure that it's quality information for you. Degrees, obviously, people with their educational experiences, and we do have a broad spectrum of the different people in our different disciplines that we have on our staff, of whom I'm very proud to work with, and they really do take their job very seriously every day, trying to collect this data and making sure it's the best data that we can produce. Quality, as I talked about, we have a team that goes through and, again, as I said, watches, monitors our defined processes, audits the data, and just as a further detail, every 2 weeks we have a review of the audits that have been done, and we actually look for an audit to fail because it finds something that we were not doing the process way. And so it is part of our culture that's what we're always trying to find, areas where the process is not being followed with a lot of rigor. So we've actually, this is new in the last few years, and it's really coming to fruition. Today, and we continually are always improving our data through the use of these audits to have, and that it's readable and accurate. Lastly, as we finish up our data on an annualized basis, we have what we call our change control board. And when something is amiss, when we talked about the analytics and how we go through the data, and we see data that's not following the pattern that we expected it to follow, you need to bring, you, this individual who's responsible for that department, have to come in and go before a board and say, we've vetted this price. It is right. It is jumping more than the group that it used to belong to. And therefore, now it's got to be part of another group. So it goes into a whole new process to be able to be associated to a different grouping. But it's the most valuable piece of work that we do to make sure that we are all on board, that changes in prices are valid and that we can stand behind them and defend them. So with that, I'm going to give Bob back at the controls and let him talk about using the RSMeans data, and appreciate that. And we'll be back to talk to you again. Bob?
Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about, because I mentioned so many times in the previous part of my presentation, averages and nationally priced items. I want to talk a little bit about how we make an adjustment or how we use an index to change the price from national to something a little bit more regional. So imagine, if you will, a building that is built using national average data. We then take that building, and that building consists of more than one building type, because we don't want our index to be influenced by any one particular type. We build it of 9 different building types: an office building, a school, a factory, a warehouse, and so on. We use that building as the basis for our city cost index. The city cost index is the way that we index the national average prices to different parts of the country. In the printed publications, this has to be manual. In the electronic products, it's automatic. When somebody's building an estimate, generally we ask for the location where it's going, or we ask people to enter the first 3 digits of a zip code, and we cover the first 3 digits of every zip code across the United States. We build that building in every single location every quarter virtually. It's a computer program, obviously, in our offices that takes the data that we collect quarterly, and it's 66 construction materials, 22 trades, and 6 pieces of equipment that are collected around the United States every quarter. We will build the building, this virtual building, at a national average, and then we'll build it at a local using the local costs. So what we're showing here is 3 examples, very volatile areas with very different pricing: San Francisco, California, Ketchikan, Alaska, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And what's really interesting is to look at is at this very bottom is the difference in the installation index for those 3 locations: 164, 114, 29, indicating to me the difference in wages that are being paid to the tradespeople in those locations. It's really important to understand something about this city cost index. You'll note that we break it down into a very granular breakdown of costs. We're not just applying one number here. Now, some people using RSMeans data may just go to this number, the total weighted average, and use just that one number. But the strength of the city cost index lies in the fact that we have this information broken down by CSI division, or if you're using assemblies, by uniformat element. And in some cases, even within a division, we've broken it down even further. And we do break it down into material, installation, and a total. So it's important to understand that when you're using RSMeans data, especially in the electronic products, you've got the strength of all of that research behind you, developing the indexed costs for your estimates. What does the city cost index do? Well, it provides a highly accurate and granular way to compare specific costs in different cities compared to the national average or other cities. The city cost index provides a way to see changes from quarter to quarter in the current year. The city cost index provides a way to index an estimate prepared with national average numbers to a specific location. And finally, the city cost index provides the information that is used to determine our historical cost index, which enables you to understand the differences in cost over an extended period of time. Some of the rules that we follow for the understanding the city cost index. First off, in all the locations that we do research, we get a minimum of 2 material prices for each material. We do not include sales tax. We ask for the delivered cost, again, same as for the base data, delivered to within 20 miles of their locations. There are some exceptions. Some of the materials are not readily available in every market, so we do have to extend this for some locations. We get the wage rates and we ask to include fringes, but we're not putting any burdens on it here, no overhead or profit. And then for the equipment, we're including fuel and routine maintenance. Again, I can't stress enough how granular the information is and how important it is when you apply the city cost index to understand that it is breaking the price down based upon hours and hours and hours of research that our team performs. So it's my turn to pass the controls back to Tim again, who's going to talk about our innovations. Tim?
Okay, Bob, thank you. And I was informed that my video internet connection was not working very well, so I'm going to leave my video off for now. So we'll make it a little bit easier. But just in closing, we want to talk about innovations, things that we're doing with our data and what we found by studying our historical data and moving on and doing new things to the data and to our products to help you be better estimators and to provide better data. Okay. One of the things that we've created is predictive cost data for materials as an example. And quite specifically, none of you build an estimate based on something you're building today. You're always building it for tomorrow. So the number one question that we always get from clients is, what's the cost going to be in the future? And in order to do that, we use history to find out, based on the way that we collect data and publish it, what other indicators in the marketplace help you understand the changes in that those costs over time. And this happens to be a specific example of a material group that we did some tracking on from 2002 up to the time when we were doing this data, which was in the 60th period, so every quarter. What the trend was of that data that we collected, and what were the other indexes that correlated to that trend over those time, and could we build an algorithm that would define that change and then therefore be able to predict it in the past. And what you see here as an example is once we were finished with that algorithm, you then go back and test that algorithm and see how it matches up across a long period of time. We also tested against another period of time to see, does that algorithm stay as accurate? And that's basic. That is specifically a statistical method by which we then created our predictive cost data. So by using a index aggregator, Moody's, and looking at many other index, we literally looked at over 1,000 indexes and statistically evaluated them until we got down to 4 or 5 indexes that we could build an algorithm with that would say, here, based on the changes in those indexes, how did that correlate to the actual data that we collected over this historical period of time? Build that algorithm, and now we can use that algorithm going forward because we use those Moody's indexes that are forecasting to the future to feed, because there's a lead and a lag on each one of those indexes statistically, and then we can apply that and say, here's what we predict the price to be for that material into the future. And specifically what we do is then put that into our unit cost line, that formula that you saw for each unit cost line for the material, the labor, and the equipment. And you can now go and select out a location and a point in time in the future, up to 3 years in advance. And we can tell you, here's what we believe this statistical process is going to be the cost of this material at that point in time in that location. So I just wanted to kind of go through and tell you a little bit about how we do that and how it works and what it was showing. And this all came along because we went and looked at our history and saw that all the materials don't react the same. Specifically, this graph is showing the volatility of prices in each master format division. So electrical materials versus plumbing materials versus concrete. And you can see that year over year, their price changes are not the same, and that they are very diverse. So literally, we had to go and build a model algorithm that represented each group, and we're literally at probably over 60 different algorithms, because it's not just by CSI division, it's down to the copper pipe versus the steel pipe, as an example. So it's just one of the things we wanted to show you as far as how we did this and what it how we put this to work for us in order to use analytics to do that predictive pricing. The results of it, mathematically, it comes out here, and as an example that we tend to show people, what we were very proud of is in building this algorithm, applied it to data at that point in time, what we knew in 2008, our algorithm was then applied to see what was going to happen in the next 2 years. And what we're showing here is that it actually does predict the downturn that we saw in 2009 and the uptick that started back in 2010 for the price of this material. This happens to be an example. I believe it happens to be a steel grouping of materials, but this is how we found our algorithms that we developed and how they would predict the prices. So we're very confident in the results that we're showing, and even in the event of a catastrophic recession, the algorithm performed very well. So that's one of what this model is about. The next thing I wanted to talk about was artificial intelligence that Noam mentioned in the beginning. We are using artificial intelligence. Computers, obviously, in today's world, capture we have lots and lots of data available to us, and artificial intelligence is a way to use that computer power to evaluate, as you can see here in the example, line by line items in order to understand what the components are of that line by line item are, and also we correlate that with scopes of work, and that's what our AI is one of the first things we're doing with it, is to help someone who's building an estimate read the scope, have the AI read the scope, and it assists you in trying to understand what line items should be in your cost estimate. And I'm going to go on to the next screen, because it actually shows you, it gives you, this is an example of how our system currently works, is that it comes up with these line items, and then the buttons that you see over on the right, or whether, hey, here's a recommended list of unit cost lines that you might want to include in this scope of this estimate, and the ability to be able to say, yeah, I want to use that one, no, I don't, or I want to use some modification of that line item. So this is where we're going, and using technology, as we talked about in today's world, to improve what we can do and provide for you to create better cost estimates. So we're very excited about how this is working, and the beta program is just rolling out, and it's out in the field and beginning to go forward. So with that, Lisa, I will let you close up and that.
Okay, I know we've gone a little beyond the hour. I think that we have the okay from Sammy to take a couple of questions for those that would like to stay on, and we do have a couple of good questions. And so I'll start with a question. Well, quickly before we launch into questions, I will say if anybody is interested in these innovations, there will be a webinar in November on our predictive costing effort. And also we have a beta version of the AI. We have kind of a beta program that's running with our AI estimating. And so if anybody's interested in that, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see if we can get you involved in the beta. But I want to turn to your questions. And we're going to start with a question from Tom Svoboda. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm going to direct this question to Bob Mewis. Tom is asking, how do you adjust for labor efficiency for remote projects, secure areas, or other things that impact the labor efficiency?
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great question. So in RSMeans data, particularly in Division 1, the general requirements, we do have something that we call modifiers, and I think I mentioned those. Modifiers for different conditions that you may face for construction projects. There's a large section specifically around security, but there's also some other sections that involve working with general contractors that are not experienced versus general contractors that are, working in different areas, working in space that is a bit restrictive. So there are some modifiers that are available in Division 1, the general requirements for your use. But Lisa, did you want to add to that?
Well, so I think we are beginning to look at what we call contextual cost drivers. We recognize that there's a need among government and industry to get a better handle on those contextual cost drivers. And so Bob and his team led an effort for one of our federal customers down in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico post Irma and Maria hurricanes to do some modifications to a database for their use that actually incorporated some of these modifiers or differences in cost for remote areas, for travel, for productivity differences. And so it's something that we're starting to experiment with a little bit under Bob's leadership, and it's definitely on our roadmap to continue to refine our ability to support contextual cost estimating. Yeah. So, and there is actually a follow-on SAMI webinar, I believe, on September 10th around our work for FEMA in really predicting costs in a volatile post-disaster environment. So that may be something that folks are interested in. One more question, and I'm going to ask the question, but then I'm going to broaden and amend the question, and I'm going to direct this one to Tim Duggan. So Dana Patterson asks, is there the potential to expand your cost books to include more environmental restoration and shoreline scopes of work items, in addition to adding new soil erosion and sediment controls, which are being integrated into regulations? So it's a great specific question, and I'll invite you to answer that, Tim, but more importantly, to provide our listeners with a little insight into how we determine new line items, when we integrate new line items into the database, and how we prioritize those items.
Sure, Lisa. Two parts to that answer. One is that a reference was made early in the talk that we get phone calls from users of our service and asking questions. That is our #1 way for finding out what we really need to add to our book. And I'm talking about 2,200 calls every year, specifically about line items in our data, and can you help me with having to develop a cost for this? So that's definitely one of the items that we use is to how to prioritize it, as well as what we talked about in usage. We create estimating data, and we also create procurement data in our job program. And we look at both of those sets of data to see what kind of work is actually being done and how it has to be more specific based on new regulations like you're talking about, so that we can add those kind of items into our database. So it is a continual process of being able to monitor and listen to what's going on in the marketplace as codes change. We're always evaluating, okay, this code's going to mean we need to add this into our database so that we have the right items. So it is a constant monitoring of the industry. Some of those time and motion studies that Bob mentioned, we use those to see what kind of new things are being developed, and then we add those into our database. But I can tell you that the environmental items that you were talking about is something that actually is on our plate, and we actually have that on our roadmap to increase the items in that section. So.
Great. And I think we also might want to make the audience aware that we have our commercial off the shelf RSMeans data, but we have always worked with enterprise customers, larger customers, many of whom are federal agencies, where they have unique cost data needs. The RSMeans and Gordian teams are available to do custom configurations, tailored customer-specific cost data research. That is something that we do as a customer-specific engagement. And then, Gordian has always spun up, has always supported job order contracting and IDIQ programs with always customer-specific data. And so we develop data for really any situation, any type of infrastructure or facilities. And that's very much part of Gordian's historic value proposition, and one that we're now integrating with the commercial off-the-shelf RSMeans product. So something to keep in mind. So I think we're now 11 minutes beyond our allotted time, and we thank everyone for staying on and for your attentiveness. This team is available to you. Certainly I and my entire Federal Solutions team are available to answer any follow-on questions. We can be a conduit to our data and engineering team and make sure to get your questions answered. And so I invite you to continue the dialogue and continue asking questions. And we thank everyone for your attendance. And Noam, Tim, and Bob, thank you so much for your expertise that you brought to the table for our federal customers.
Thank you all for the amazing presentation. I would like to just go over a couple of upcoming events that we have going on. Again, as Lisa mentioned, we do have another webinar September 10th at 2 p.m. titled Predicting Construction Costs in Volatile Markets, Lessons from Recent Disasters. And you can use that link to register. You can also find that registration on the SAME.org webpage under the calendar of events. And then we also have the 2020 Virtual Small Business Conference held November 4th through the 6th, and registration will be open Tuesday, September 1st. So make sure you want to get over there and get your early bird registration at SAMESBC.org. And thank you all for participating in today's webinar, and hope to see you soon. Have a great day.